Thank you, everybody, for coming back to the latest edition of the Colorado Victim Advocate. Our podcast here, we highlight all of the wonderful programs and advocacy here in Colorado because we feel that's important. Victim advocacy, it's a big part of the criminal justice system, and there's so many organizations out there that really do need to have their programs showcased. But also, too, we talk to survivors who have survive some terrible things, and bringing their experiences forward, talking about them, those are important as well. And even those folks who do talk about it, they have created lives beyond it, and they've made something work from it. They've done good with it, and we're going to be talking to somebody about that today. Intervention, Inc., we are a nonprofit organization based in Colorado. We've been around since 1986. We provide numerous court services around the state, including offender supervision, pretrial services, substance abuse monitoring, and comprehensive victim services. My name is Randy Saucedo, and I'm the director of our Victim Services Division, and I am so thrilled today to have with us Stacey Berry. She is somebody that I saw on 9 News, and I said, there's somebody that I want to talk to. There's somebody that, that's got some really great experiences, and they've done something with them, and I want to talk to her about it. So, Stacey, welcome to our program today.
Thank you so much, Randy, for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, Stacey, when I saw you first on 9 News, you were part of a class that was there at Metro. And I'd like to talk to you a little bit about that because as a survivor and as an advocate, you know as well as I do, and you certainly have the personal experience of recognizing that one of the biggest obstacles of survivors of domestic violence to escape is housing. And I'd like to talk to you a little bit about that. So just kind of tell us a little bit about that program.
Absolutely. So the class that I'm in is the Intro to Affordable Housing. It is just what it says. It's really getting us into what affordable housing is. I'm also a realtor, so I wanted to use my real estate license to give back. And affordable housing is meeting people where they're at. In that class, we're learning about different reasons why people need affordable housing, and domestic violence survivors are one of those groups of people that need that affordable housing. So it just helps me tie that in with my organization.
And I want you to talk about that organization too, because again, as survivors, myself being one, we want to take our experiences and we want to make good out of them. And the work that I've done, not only with our survivor empathy panels, but just being a victim's advocate for as long as I have been, and creating this podcast, the work that you do has been very important in addressing that. But I'd like you to talk about your organization, Harriet's Liberation. Please tell us about that, please.
Yes. So it's Harriet's Liberation Society. And what we do is we are basically a liaison for women who are coming out of domestic violence relationships, still in domestic violence.
Exactly. That's very important.
Yes, just in transition. We're really there to meet them where they're at, give them that courage if they're trying to get the courage to leave, if they need to get a safety plan to kind of map things out. If they just need somebody to sit there with them and cry on the phone to help them gather themselves. So we're just that person that people need.
And that is a really big need in our community because a lot of times, unfortunately, people don't understand the dynamics of domestic violence and the experiences that we have as survivors. We try to bring that information out to them. And so the work that Harriet's Liberation Society does, do you liaison with, you said you liaison with other organizations, is that correct?
Correct. So we have different resources that we provide. The Harriet Gotta Go bags, they're for women who leave in the middle of the night and
Mhm.
may have nothing at all. Like that was my situation. That's why we created Harriet Gotta Go Bags.
Mhm.
Because when you have to go, you have to go, and
Mhm.
sometimes you don't have the chance to think about what you need to pack. So we partner with domestic violence shelters and other organizations that may have women that are in need, and we get a bag together. So we find out, her sizes, if she's got kids, and we get a bag together for that lady. And yeah, so
And so, in talking about that too, because, the gotta go bags, that's really important because, in a situation where a victim is escaping, fleeing from abuse, fleeing from the possibility of being killed, because we know
Mhm.
that happens. Can you talk about, and certainly too, if you want to talk about your own personal experience about creating something like that, because again, a lot of people don't realize that that's a very important part of a safety plan.
It definitely is a very important part. And it's something that you're not thinking about in that moment, especially if you gotta go.
Mhm.
That has so much to do with that name because um in my situation, we had to go,
Mhm.
and it had gotten to the point where it's like, do I stay here?
Mhm.
Do I somehow escape this and, become homeless with my children? Or do I find myself killed or a murderer?
Mhm.
So it was like, what are we going to do? Um, I chose homelessness.
And that is a choice, unfortunately, that too many victims, as we talked about prior to us recording, that they have to make that choice. And unfortunately, sometimes, a lot of times, they will remain in that abusive relationship
Yeah.
because there is no place to go. And you talked about too about having your children with you when this happened. Um, in a gotta go bag. Tell us what's inside there.
So it really has the hygiene products for starters. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
always got the hygiene products. It usually has a loaded card because most people don't have any money.
Exactly.
We can also get access to the the human services phones
Mm-hmm.
because most people don't have those.
Mm-hmm.
It's really based on what the lady is needing. So we find out what her needs are and we get the bag together. If she has children, then we'll reach out to different places who have children's clothing and things for children, and we'll add that to the bag.
And that is something too that again we try to really instill to people about understanding what domestic violence is, because when children witness it, becoming traumatized witnessing it, they have a tendency to obviously try to disassociate themselves from that. And in the work that you've done, or even in the experiences that you've had, how would what would you tell somebody out there who has children, who's in possibly a situation that where you were in prior to escaping? What would you tell that person about what they can do for their kids?
I would tell them to just be courageous. Don't let the overwhelming fear keep them from becoming safe
Mhm.
because you'll have all of these things in your head of why you shouldn't leave, or what are your kids going to think about you guys living on the streets
Mhm.
possibly, or not having the clothes and the items, materials that they used to. All of that goes through your head. But I would just say, really take the children into consideration because that narrative goes with them,
Mhm.
and it also sticks with them how you dealt with it because that lets them know how to deal with situations.
Mhm.
If they're like, well, my mom, I saw her in this relationship for 30 years. And for some kids that can say, I'm not going to be in a relationship like that. Or they can say, hey, that's all I saw. That's what I
Mm-hmm.
normalized,
Mm-hmm.
And so I would just tell people to just, take the kids into consideration because they see and they hear more than what we think, even if they're in the room. If they're downstairs, they can hear, they can see, and it it stays with them. They can't go to school and be normal and have fun because they're thinking about the fight they heard through the wall.
Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. And I think too that that's an important piece too. And just talking about our survivor empathy panels, that's a big part of what our panels talk about because the majority of our panelists that they have children who witness the abuse. And I would always say too, from my own personal experience, it's the children are never that asleep.
Right,
That they
right.
always hear what's going on. And you are absolutely correct that a child is, they don't have the ability to become a child, to live as a
Mhm,
child. And you are correct again with regards to those children when they go to school. They can't concentrate. They're falling
mhm,
asleep, and we talk about that piece too with our panelists about how that impacts kids. But also too, you've been, and I'm so privileged to be here in front of you because you survived that. You thrived from it, and I'd like you to talk about how you were able to make that choice. And it wasn't a fateful choice, but it was a choice that said, I'm going to do something with my life and it's not going to be this. And yet you achieved a lot since then. And can you talk about how you were able to do that?
Really, all I can say is it was the grace of the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot give anything else any credit. I had the strength and the wherewithal, looking at my daughters and seeing them like, Mom, this is not okay. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I just remember telling myself, like, your daughters are watching how you deal with this. They're watching how a man's supposed to treat them,
Mm-hmm.
how, they're watching all of this.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't allow it. And so I made the choice between, okay, like I said, are we gonna possibly end up having to save our own life and
Mm-hmm.
hurt someone else?
Mm-hmm.
And then possibly have my children seeing me in a prison, you
Mm-hmm.
know what I mean?
Oh yeah,
And so
absolutely.
it was like I had to go. I
Mm-hmm.
had to go. Something was always in the back of my mind saying, "You're gonna make it. You're gonna make it. You're gonna make it."
And when you made that final choice to leave, and fortunately you were able to, go to a family member that you were able to obtain support from, and at that point, you made the decision to you want to get an education,
Mhm.
higher education. You want to get a career going, but also too, and I'd like to talk about that too, because your bio shows that you're you speak a lot, you advocate a lot out there in the community. I know for myself, being a speaker on this issue as well, I never thought for a moment that when I was in the throes of watching, the abuse go on, when I was in the throes of, seeing my mother murdered in front of me by her ex-boyfriend, I never thought for a moment that anybody would want to hear about that stuff.
Mhm.
And yet I was able to talk about it in a way that educates people, in a way that builds empathy with offenders. And for you speaking about it, kind of tell me about, your road to that point, about being asked to speak about it, being out there in front. Because as an advocate, that's what we do. I tell people, an advocate is a noun, it's a subject, it's an adjective, it's a verb.
Right.
And being out there, I'd like you to talk about that too, because I'm sure there's a lot of people that want to hear about that experience.
Well, I mean, just being approached initially, I was fearful to be on the spotlight. It's like, what do I say?
How much do I
How
want to
much do
give?
and then you pull back one layer, and then they're like, well, what happened inside of that layer? And it's like, okay, am I really unveiling?
I laugh
You
because
know?
this is exactly what I had gone
Yeah,
through.
and
Exactly.
so you understand that it's
Mm-hmm.
like, well, what am I doing? And then on top of that, my kids, they're much older now,
Mm-hmm.
and they're like, we don't want to be associated with that,
Sure.
And so they're
Mm-hmm.
like, oh my gosh, you're on the news. Everybody's going to know that that's our mom, and they're going to
Yeah.
know that we were in that house. And,
Yes.
they're like, don't say our name. So it's me protecting them at the
Sure.
same time.
Mm-hmm.
And, um, also knowing that this is my purpose and my
Yes.
voice has the power to help someone else get out, and I know that. So I had to just break it down to them and let
Mm-hmm.
them know that your mom is being called, and that's why everything's just jumping out like
Mm-hmm.
this. So I'm being called, and I have to obey that.
Mm-hmm.
I feel it inside of me that someone is going to be empowered to save their own life, because that's how I felt that I was doing, saving not only my life, but my children's life.
Mm-hmm. And I think too that the first time that I was ever asked to speak, I was asked to speak at various church groups, and again, I wasn't sure about how graphic I could be.
Mm.
Because as you know, domestic violence is so destructive, so violent. And, a lot of those terrible things come along with it. The emotional abuse, the psychological abuse, but the verbal abuse too,
Right.
just as deep and just as cutting as the physical abuse. And, for me, I wasn't sure what I could really say. And how did you become at least comfortable, if you want to use that word, with just talking about the truly ugliness of violence?
I realized that transparency has power.
Mm-hmm.
And, when someone can see the vulnerability and hear it and just be able to say, you know what, this person is being authentic. And I can associate with the authenticity with them. And that is what gives the power to have them make that change. So
Mm-hmm.
I had to get outside of myself and
Mm-hmm.
realize that this is beyond me.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm saying, when I realized that it was a purpose that was greater than me, and I experienced these things because someone is supposed to be helped.
Mm-hmm.
So when I took myself out the equation and realized it was a bigger purpose, and it allowed me to be transparent and be vulnerable, and whoever is hearing it in that moment, they always are going to understand.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm never going to compromise myself as long as I'm being authentic.
And I think that's the important part too, is because whenever persons who are out there speaking about their experiences, and there's a lot of folks doing that, which is really great. But I think that's the important part about the authenticity, about talking about those experiences. And unfortunately, sometimes you have to really get down into the terribleness of it. And I think too, by being able to talk about those things in a way that people can truly understand, or hopefully understand, I think that can, break down those walls that people think they know about the abuse that goes on. And for you, recognizing that and being a part of that, I have no doubt that's made you much more of an advocate for victims. And whenever you come in contact with somebody who's experiencing that, and they might ask you about your experiences, how do you feel like you want to give them the benefit of your experience, but also to not in a way that you're telling them what to do, but you're just giving them some options. Can you just talk about a little bit about that? If somebody's asking you, well, how did you deal with it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I just basically go through my experience
Mm-hmm.
and put my feelings out there. I always go from a me perspective, so they don't feel like, "Oh, I'm being told what to do,"
Excellent.
so
Yes.
there's no pushback because no one wants to be told what to do.
Exactly.
And everyone always hears, "You gotta leave them.
Mm,
You gotta leave them. You
mhm,
gotta go. What are you doing? Why are you still with this
mhm,
person who's
mhm,
abusing you?" So they've heard that. And what I say is, how does the change affect you?
mhm, mhm,
How what does it look like if you envisioned yourself on the other side?
mhm, mhm.
Like, so I try to let people have the vision of the other side.
And that's wonderful too, because you are correct. In advocacy, we always tell folks, we never want to tell a victim, well, this is what I would do, or
Mhm.
maybe you should do this, because you are correct. It's like, all the experiences of what somebody's going through, they're all different. But yet domestic violence, tragically at its core, is all the same.
Mhm.
Physical abuse, psychological abuse, sexual abuse, financial abuse, emotional, all those things like that. And being able to overcome that, or at least for me, I don't really want to say I overcame it. I just lived with it and I used something from it.
Mhm.
And so, with the work that you're doing now, how do you see where you feel like you want to be going from there, from this point?
So my goal is to get in the schools, talk to the kids.
Uh huh.
I have a curriculum called Take a Stand. It's with the Teen Harriet.
Uh huh.
And we go to different organizations, youth organizations. It's a 6 week module program,
Uh huh.
and we just go through what healthy relationships look like,
Uh
what
huh.
what self love looks like, just really meeting the domestic violence at the core.
Uh huh.
Um, and it just goes into all relationships, not just your intimate relationships, but your friendships, your relationships at work. It's healthy boundaries and setting boundaries. So just really getting to the youth and really helping them understand what healthy relationships look like because they're the future.
Mhm. And there's probably a better than average chance that they might be in a situation that's starting to become controlling, because we
Mhm.
know that its core with domestic violence, male and female same sex relationship, it's power and control.
Right.
Somebody wants power and control over that person. They're going to utilize all kinds of threats of violence and acts of violence to get there and maintain it.
Mhm.
And I think by getting into those groups and talking to them about it, that's really important. And if you can just talk a little bit more about, I mean, kind of give me, your presentation on your organization. I mean, just talk about, the wonderful programs that it has, and
Oh,
the
yeah.
good that it does. Please do.
Absolutely. So, I mentioned the Harriet Gotta Go
Mm-hmm.
bags. That is a part of the Harriet closet.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's where we have the clothes. We have Dress for Success in Harriet's closet, where women can get clothes that are getting ready for interviewing, who have
Mm-hmm.
been out of the workplace for, sometimes years,
Mm-hmm.
when they've been stay-at-home moms. So we help them get the confidence with the Dress for Success. Then we have Teen Harriet.
Mm-hmm.
That is the Take a Stand curriculum that works with the teens,
Mm-hmm.
um, getting them the knowledge and the support for healthy relationships, building healthy relationships, how to report abuse, where to turn, that type of thing. And then we have, um, I feel like I'm missing that. Oh, and then we have the legal services.
Mm-hmm.
So, the ladies who are needing help filing their divorces, so we can help draft paperworks,
Oh, incredible.
um,
Mm-hmm.
and just help them in the legal process of where to go.
Mm-hmm.
With my legal background as a paralegal,
Mm-hmm.
when women come in, there's always some kind of legality to it. They have to get a restraining order in some cases. And managing the legal field is not easy for,
Not at all.
just it's a whole different language.
Mm-hmm.
So we offer assistance with drafting paperwork and just understanding that process while you're in transition. Um, excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing we offer is Frederick's Place.
Mm-hmm.
It is for the men who find themselves um, wanting to not be an abuser anymore,
Mm-hmm.
or the guys that say, I'm gonna change, you know. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, well, you can start by showing these kind of changes. So Frederick's Place is just resources for men, and they can, you know, go on the website, reach out and see different things in the community where they can get some support.
That's where and talk about how people can get a hold of get a hold of this organization. I mean, talk about, how they can contact you.
Yes, so we can be contacted at harrietls.com. That's our website. We do everything virtual, so our peer advocacy and support groups and things like that are all online. So
Uh-huh.
we can support women everywhere. That's the best part.
Because you always want to, get to that point where you can, provide as much assistance out there as possible. But I know that as an advocate, sometimes you just feel like there isn't enough, that you can do. And so, if you can, just talk about, um, where you see yourself going. Because, I mean, you talked about, being a survivor, being, a paralegal, being a speaker, being with Harriet's organization. I mean, just talk about how can you manage all of that at once, and a mother, and just being able to have, the ability to just, have a good day.
Right. You know, I just see myself thriving as long as someone's being able to benefit from what I'm doing, then it brings me so much joy. You know, being able to help someone,
Mhm,
being able to understand or make someone feel heard.
mhm.
Sometimes you just need to feel heard.
Absolutely.
So just being the space, holding the space that I needed when I was in that situation,
Huh.
being that person that I needed. So I just always reflect on what did I need? What did I need? You know, what kind of person would I have been if I was not in that situation? Like if I was talking to myself.
And I think that's an important part too, because a lot of times too, survivors, we reflect on what we would have done,
Hmm.
and we reflect on, you know, where we want to go. And so, Stacey sitting here right now, if you could talk to Stacey back then, what would you tell her?
Whew. What would I tell her? Don't ignore red flags ever.
Good.
Never ignore red flags. If you feel in your intuition, in your spirit, that something's wrong, if you feel afraid, intimidated, in the slightest way, it grows, you
Hmm.
know? It grows. And then once it's a monster, it's a monster.
And I think that that's an important part too, because too many times, within the cycle of abuse, that it's like, okay, something is going to happen, or something does happen, and maybe things will be okay for a long time.
Mhm.
And then unfortunately, when something happens again, it just escalates each time, but it may go down again, and then it may escalate even more. And I think those are the important things too that we try to tell victims that we work with, because there truly is a difference between being a victim and being a survivor.
Yes.
And for myself and as you, we see ourselves as survivors, but also too, I think too we have a responsibility,
Mhm.
the responsibility of the work that we do, and I think coming to that point of working with people, giving them back our knowledge and our information, I think that's really an important piece too. And so I would probably say too, my question to you, Stacey, as we kind of come to a close a little bit on this, tell me what you want people to know about you, about your or the work that you do, the organization that you do.
Yeah, absolutely. I am here to serve, is what I realized. That all of the stuff that happened in the past was for this moment, for me
Mhm,
to be able to be here for someone else, to be their strength, to hold them up, to be the victor.
mhm.
I like the term survivor, but I consider myself a victor because I go back and I grab that other
I like
person,
that. I like that.
So and it's like courageousness to
Mhm,
say, I a survivor, you can survive it and no one ever knew you went through it.
mhm.
A victor, it's like, no, we went through this. This is,
We're gonna change all of our language now. That's
it's
okay too.
but it's just how I guess how I think of it in my
Sure,
mind. But
absolutely.
for me, I'm like, you know what? I am victorious
Uh-huh,
from this. It doesn't define me by any means. That was a situation that I experienced that does not define me.
uh-huh.
So I want people to see me and not what I experienced.
Absolutely. And I think that's probably, the best piece that we try to tell people. And I really do like that about, because you are correct. You can be a survivor and nobody knows what you went through. But yes, being, a victor is something that you can hold up and you can say,
Mhm.
this is what I did. This is what I had to do. This is
Yeah,
what I had to do for my children. This is what I had to do for the future,
right.
my future. And I think that's probably one of the best pieces that we can try to let people know about. And I think by having you here today and talking about all these wonderful things, I truly want to have you back. I really do. I mean, because I think you have such a knowledge about this, about what you've survived through. I think that's really important, and I truly want to thank you for being here today with us. Is there anything that you'd like to close with? Because again, I want to highlight your program, but highlight you too.
Yes, absolutely. Just thank you for seeing me and bringing me here so people can hear my voice, my story. And, I'm just hoping that whoever is touched by this, they're able to reach out, they're able to connect and get what they need because that makes me feel joy. That's what brings me joy.
Absolutely. Well, I truly want to thank you, Stacey, for being here with us today. The Colorado Victim Advocate, we're a bi-weekly podcast here highlighting those organizations and victim advocates and survivors and victors who have overcome so much and are now using their voice, their tools, their experience to help others. And by having Stacey here today, been so honored to finally meet her, having her here, and I know that we're going to have her come back very soon. So thank you very much, Stacey, for being here.
Thank you.